6, 2012, and we have a double header today. The first recording will be with Dell. The second will be with Bob Roos about an hour later. So I am now, don't forget about DevCon 2012. Sign up before the end of August for early bird. Sooner the better. You can join us on pre-conference development sessions. So anyway, you all know that. Recording. This is Ben Dell, and he's going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. And anytime, it's yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Arnold. What I'm going to talk about today is the ability for the end user running your WINDEV program to create data sources and select them. We're typically looking at, let's say, a financial system that somebody wants to connect to different years or databases. So what I've done is I've gone and created a little application, just a wizard application directly from the tables which is available inside the WINDEV, and I've gone and created a full application RAD, which gives me something like this. So we can compile that. Then we can run it, and we see there's a little application, and it's got file, exit, company, list of companies, and we can add a new one and whatever. And in this instance, obviously, we are stuck with a single database. Okay, if we go back to the analysis, you will see that I made all the tables HyperFile Classic. If we go and describe a table, you will see it is a HyperFile Classic and there's no connection specified for this. This then allows the application, when it's running, create the files inside the same directory as where the application is running. That is the application there, and those are the data files. Here's the files for your HyperFile Classic. Okay, so what I normally do is I allow my clients to specify where their data files should be. I also allow them to specify if the data should be on their local system as a single user or somewhere on the network as a multi-user system. And I do this all with the HyperFile Classic and client server. The first thing I normally do is I make use of user groupware, so I don't have to write end user security. So I go to workshop, configure the user groupware, and I say I will enable the management of user groupware for this application. I'm going to do a custom integration. I'm going to start the user groupware, and I'm going to also modify where the tables are. So I'm starting it, I'm modifying where it is. I can give it a unique password, which is my own, and I can keep track of history, logs, and so on, but I normally don't do that at this point. So I just tick custom integration and manual start. And what the system does is it goes and creates windows which are associated with the user groupware for me, and this is added in. I can go and edit these windows if I really want to. It also creates some procedures for me. These are the procedures which are associated with the user groupware, and I've got access to that. I can go and play around with it. I can add groupware tables into the analysis if I want to. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so obviously now I need to start the groupware, and one of the things which I do is I add into my file structure the option to select database or data records. And the first thing that my application does is normally open that, or I can just go and call it and let's say open select database. The other way around. I will first go and create a window. So I need to add a table that will hold my databases. Okay, one of the things I haven't done is I haven't defined where my database is going to lie. So let's go and do that quickly. I'm going to copy the data files for where my database is lying from a separate system. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to paste in here a table called data sources. It holds my database name, a friendly name. It tells me what server holds my database, what's the database name, what's the server port, the username, the password, and then what I've got here is something called database type, and I make it classic or client server. Now classic is obviously HyperFile Classic, and client server is HyperFile. If it is selected as classic, it means that the guy is working on his local machine, single user mode. He can share that via network shares. Client server is selecting a HyperFile SQL server somewhere on his network. It might be on his own machine or anywhere on the network. And this is the location of where the database is if it is selected as classic. Okay, so I've got that now. So let's just update my project with that. Synchronize anything, and I'm not going to fill the project. Okay, so I'm back here and I'm going to create a new window called table, and I'm going to say I want to create a table on my data sources, and I want to view the database name and let's say the server name. I want them to edit it. Okay, so let's quickly work through this. I hate these move as I move my window around type of thing. So what I normally do is I switch that off, make it smaller, the database name, and the reason I've got the server name is you might have the same database name times, or you might not know what server a specific database is. So I like to put it like that. Okay, that there. I'm going to allow them to add a new, modify or delete a database. I'm not going to print, I'm going to close that, and let's make that a bit smaller. And then obviously what I need is I need a button where they can actually select and continue a database. So let's make that a bit smaller, make that smaller, bring that in there, and this one will be called select and continue. Okay, and we will put a thing in there that says database to work around with that. I'm not gonna play around with it too much, so I'm just going to make it look nice quickly by selecting something from somewhere else and pasting it in there. Now that looks nice. Okay, and obviously once we're done with that, we also need a window for the end user to go and create their new databases. So on the data sources, we will allow them to select anything or everything. Let's quickly go and get rid of all of that. Get back in here, but in a nicely formatted way. Okay, so what we've got is the guy puts in the database name. He selects what type of database it is. Then on there comes the server name, the database name, the username, and the port. Okay, so that is done, and we are happy with that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to say he is going to open a table to select a data source. Okay, so let's go ahead and go and play with that. On the project, now I select a data source and it pops up a list for me, and I can now go and say this is my test database, and the data type is classic, meaning it's on my machine. And you will see I haven't created hide and unhide capabilities yet, but that's now my test database, and I can go create a new one, and that is test SQL server, and that will be client server desktop. Database name is win live test, username admin. And so we've got a classic database, and obviously at this point in time nothing happens yet. Okay, so two things that needs to happen is we need to connect user security for our system, and we also need to select the database. So what we will do is the following. I will go into my button here for selecting a database, and I will go and put some code in there. And the first thing which I will do is I will actually go and fetch the record which the person has selected in the table. So I will do a hreadseek first on data sources, data name, and that is table data sources dot data name. So I make sure that I get everything which is inside my data sources table for the record which is selected in the table. So then I've got two cases. I've got a switch on data sources dot database type, and the one is case classic, and the other one is case and server. Okay, so now I need to define what's going to happen when the classic database is selected and when the client server is selected. There's no other, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Now, the first thing which I need to do when selecting a data source is obviously create a connection. But I'm going to bypass creating the connection because the user groupware, when you do a manual start of the user groupware, you actually create a connection as well. So I'm going to go and do a user groupware open connection. So if GPW open open connection, and I'm going to give this a name, and I'm going to say test connection 1, and I'm going to give it, because it's classic, because it's the classic one, there's going to be no username and there's going to be no password, and my data source will be data sources dot database location, and the database name, because it is optional at this point, will be that, and my data type will be HyperFile Classic. So if that is how I open a connection. Now if we go and look at open connection, we return a true if the operation was performed or a false. So I will say here, if it is false, then I will do a error info else, and I will go, and because this opens up connection for the client server, I've already got a connection at that point. So I will go and describe for myself a connection for my data. Describe connection, and I will name this test connection, and I will use the same details as what I did for the user groupware, but only for my client data. Then I will go and open this actual connection, sorry, gremlins are moving the keys around on my keyboard. Test connection, and then I'm going to perform a login. So I need to perform login, and that's going to be so I need to perform login there, and I'm going to do precisely the same things for the client server, but I'm going to just bypass typing all the code by copying that and pasting that in there. And the first thing I need to change is I need to change that to client server, which is HyperFile client server. Then I also need to go there and give the database a name. So that will be data sources dot database name, and I need to give the username and the password dot password and data sources dot username. Okay, so what we're sitting with now, and let me just close this a bit, save that. What we're sitting with now is we're getting the record which the user has selected, we're first looking to see what type of database it is. If it's a classic database, which is local, or if it's a client server, and that is SQL Remote. And in our instance, we make use of the HyperFile Classic client server and HyperFile SQL in SQL mode. You will see that we also create a connection for our user groupware, and we create a connection for our data, which is different from user groupware. Now, what we are going to go do is go and log in to the system. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm first going to say we need to open the login screen. So my result is an integer equals GPW open. So there I open the actual user groupware. Now I'm not going to sit and type this out. I'm just going to copy this from somewhere else. If the result is not okay, then there was an error that occurred. Okay, and it could either be an unknown user, an invalid password, or an error in initialization of the groupware. So user security.
Those are standard 1, 2, 3s.
These are standard ones. Yeah, let's quickly go there. GPW. Okay, if we go to there, you will see it comes directly out of the help file, and it's described in detail here. Invalid password, username. So this comes directly out of the help file. So I'm not doing any retyping. In fact, most of what's happening here is directly out of the help files, except for switching of the database types. Okay, so then the next part is if the result that came back is not cancelled, meaning when the guy logged in and he actually pressed the login button and not the cancel button on the login screen, then we're going to do the following. And I normally set an hourglass, and then after the fact I make the hourglass false, so that the end user knows that something's happening here. Depending on what's happening here, it can take a while depending on the amount of tables you have and those types of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the same connection for all data files. So we're going to say change connection for all files. Okay, so we've opened up a connection, and it's called test connection, and we're going to change all our data files to make use of test connection. Okay, so and then we're going to say from time to time I still modify the tables in my database. Okay, so what we're going to do is make sure all tables have same structure as analysis, and what we're doing there is I say modify structure and we're going to do that for all files, and we're going to do that as a normal check. Then we're going to say make sure all files exist, and we're going to go and say hcreate create if found. Okay, somewhere along the line I've got a spelling mistake there. It's create if not found, and I'm going to do that for all files as well. And then I'm going to close my table. So I'm going to close my window here. And if all of that is fine, then I'm going to say okay. If they've not cancelled, else if they have pressed cancelled, I'm just going to end the program. I'm going to say sorry, you're not logged in. Okay, so if we step through this quickly, I'm saying we're opening the connection to the user groupware. If there was an error, it will display the error to us, else it will allow us to create a data connection and open that data connection, which means that we've actually got two connections open to the data now. Then we actually open the login screen and we allow the user to log in, and if there was an error coming back from the login, it will show it to us. If there wasn't an error, obviously it will fall through and it will start on this line. Then we look if the guy did not press the cancel button on the login screen. We change the connection of all the tables to our data connection. We modify the structure of all our tables to make sure they conform to the structure of the analysis. Then we go and we create any tables that doesn't exist yet, and we close our selection window. Close the hourglass, and Bob's your uncle. If the guy did press cancel, we end the program and say, sorry, you cannot work with this program because you're not logged in. Now, something which somebody might have noticed or they might not have noticed is I change the connection, then I do a modify structure, and then I do a create tables. Okay, one of the things which happens is when you do create tables before a modify structure, it allows you to create the tables, but the modify structure pops up an error. For some reason, I've got no idea why. So what I've found is you first need to modify the existing tables and then create any new tables which might be in your analysis. If you do this and it's the first time it run, modify structure will just fall through because there's nothing to modify, and it will create the new tables from scratch. Okay, so I need to actually do this, but I'm not going to type it all back in here. So one of the things which I will now do is I will select this and go and create a local procedure with the code, and I will call this perform login, And all I need to do is take that and add it in there. Okay, so there is the the code behind my button to perform the login. So let's close that. So that is where that code is running. So let's go and test this. Let's save that and go and test this. Okay, and I'm going to run the executable. And let's go and select the data record. Now I said there's a test database. And let's go. Aha! It's popping up user Groupware login. If I go and cancel there, it tells me, sorry, not logged in, cannot run the program. Okay, let's go and run it again. Run that, go and select the database. We select that one, supervisor and supervisor. And now obviously we can go and configure the groupware, so I'm just going to add a new one here called Ben and Dell and yeah, let's leave it like that. Enter the password on first run and let's close that and let's run it again. And I will select that and Ben, and it says, okay, what's your password? I confirm my password and okay, I've got a problem. Now, part of my problem is that I don't have this file here because that's part of the groupware file. Okay, and after struggling around for about half a day trying to decide what to do and wara, I actually came across something which PCsoft has already made provision for us. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to either include that file into my analysis or actually go and do a clickety-click barber trick. So let's open up the analysis and let's go and create a custom folder called MyDB. Okay, and one of the things we want to put in MyDB is everything except our data source. And I'll tell you now why I don't want a data source in there. So there's MyDB, a folder called MyDB, and I can get access to MyDB there with all its tables and my data source. Now let's go and update our program.
Well, you're saving us a ton of time, aren't you?
Okay, so then now let's go back here and we go to perform login and I say, okay, what I want to do is I want to change the connection, but not for all my tables, only for my tables which is in MyDB. So what I do is I go and I put in there MyDB. And when I want to modify structure, I don't want to modify structure for everything, including my user groupware tables. I only want to do it for all the tables in MyDB. And then I'm happy with it creating all the other tables which it cannot find. Now, one of the things which I'm doing with data sources is I'm not including it in change connection. Why? And I'll tell you now why. When I'm sitting with my program and I'm working with it and I'm selecting a data source and I'm working and I'm going back to it, I want to select the data source from the original table which I had and not from the new location which I did with the change location. Okay, and that's the reason why this is also, my data sources are also excluded. So let's go around there and see what we're doing. So we go there, select database, test database, bin and bin. Hey, it works. Okay, list of companies, and I can add a new company, and there we go.
I
Let's
don't get
close
it.
that.
Ben, that
Yes,
GW user file that you said we didn't have, you still didn't do anything, but by doing this, it worked.
yes, and the reason for that is, if we go there, remember that is the user groupware files, and I don't have it in my database. But the user groupware files is lying there because the user groupware component actually creates them.
Mm.
See there, there's all the user groupware files.
So it created it on its own. Okay.
It created it on its own. Now, when I went to my project and I said configure the user groupware, I did nothing with the files. So it creates the files in the location of where my database is. I
And it did
could
it because you
go,
put in that separate folder.
because I put in that separate folder, yes. Now,
Wow, a trick.
so now let's quickly run through this and go and connect to a SQL backend. Okay, now first thing I want to do is I want to show you that on my system I don't have this database yet. Sorry, my hard drives are just booting up. Okay, so these are the databases I have on my local machine, and let's go and select a database called WINDEV Live Test. Select that. Okay. Comes from copy and paste. Okay. That's test connection.
Some say test connection 1 and some say just test connection.
Yes, yes. Um, we have here is table there. I'm just gonna go here. So what I've got is I've got test connection 1, which is my my user groupware connection. Okay, I might
Okay.
have an issue here. And I've got the same situation. This is where the fault is. Can you see here? I never changed this connection here. I forgot to change that. This connection here. I still had the copied version here. Okay,
Oh,
so
you had the
let's go and
classic
compile
down
that.
there.
Yes, I had the classic instead of the client server. So we go and select our database, and I'm going to try Ben and Ben, and it should fail because it's a new database. So I'm going to try supervisor and let's go and configure this one. Add a new user, Adam. Okay, so once again not logged in. And if we now change, select the database, Adam, and let's go to list. Oh, there's no company there. Okay. Validate that. So if we go to the list, there's Adam company. If we go and we change our database to that one,
Adam? No?
No. On. Oh, select the one. That should be Ben. Ben. Here we go. So, sorry. There we go. You see there? That's not Adam's one. And if we select our database there, so there's something which I'm not doing right here, but it means that I've got to just restart the system to be able to select the database. And I'm not very worried about that. I normally let them restart the system from scratch and not switch databases, because people tend to keep Windows open, switch databases, and suddenly the tables are lying on a different system and they're mixing and matching their data. So it's very dangerous allowing them to just start it through here without restarting the system. Any case, so what we've got here is we've got the ability for the end user to go and define their own database name, database type, as well as where the data are lying, and start the system up from there. And every database has got its own user groupware selected with it. We could make the groupware from a single groupware database, but then we don't know where the guy is. Now, my people, what they normally do is when they select a database which is local to them, or they select a database which is on a client server, they are on a laptop. So typically they work with a client server. But when they go away for a few days, they do a sync. They log into their local database, do a sync with the client server database and the local database, and off they go do their thing, come back, and then they connect back to the SQL Server database and sync their new data back to the server database. And in this instance, they determine where their local database are and where their server database are. Okay, so that is that's the whole demonstration, and this code with this application will be uploaded as part of this webinar.
Oh, make them do it themselves, man.
Okay, so Arnold, that's it.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Let me make it smaller to see if there's any questions, and we can move on over to. Let's do that. Let's bring that over here. Let's bring this over here. Okay. Are there any questions? Please. Chat away.
Maybe they're just a bit shocked.
Shocked.
Now, I'm sure that you could do this with any other databases as well. Typically create your local database as a hyper classic, and then your remote databases could be HyperSQL, or you see where I did this. Let me show you here. Okay, let's go here. Where I set what the database type is, I hard coded it to classic and client server, but you could put the MS SQL, and then obviously on your case statement, when it's MS SQL, you just select the SQL database type, and that would be done table database in and that would be done here. So instead of selecting that or that, you could be selecting there are other options to select, and those are hyperclassic, hyperclient server, sorry, AS400 DB2 Informix MySQL. So you could, with the right setup in your analysis, you could switch between any different databases. You don't really care what your client uses. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to give them all these options because you're going to create a bit of a support nightmare for yourself.
For the right money, it's okay.
Yeah, but that's it. No questions.
No, there's one here. Tomas asks, so when you install this, you include both HSQL Server plus HF Classic Generation? So
No,
you do it just because you're demonstrating, or do you always do that?
I always do this. And like I said, sometimes the guys are connected to a database at
Oh,
work, and
for
sometimes
testing,
they
right?
and then sometimes they just go home and they don't have access to the database. So they just sync the database locally to their PC, and the next morning they come back and they sync it back to the main server.
So you have a utility to sync the remote server, the SQL, I mean whatever, the client server to the classic then.
Yes, and it's part of when you're creating your setup procedures.
Uh-huh.
And one of the things that you say in your setup procedures, let me just get it. I haven't created, this is just an example here. Go through here.
Oops.
And this will be standalone. Standard, that's fine there, that's fine there. And there. You install and configure the modules for assisted universal replication.
Ah.
Okay, and you don't need any of this because this is typically already installed. Let's quickly include that, and then you go and edit your universal replication. You can create new replication schemes and whatever, and this distributes with your application. And when you set up the application, it asks you where is the server and where is your data locations, and it actually syncs the server locally, not to your computer, during the initial installation of the application.
Cool. Chris says
And
I will have to download the recording and watch it in slow motion.
yes, Chris, and also download the source code, eh?
Yeah.
Sorry, we
Yeah.
only had an hour and we've got 3 minutes left.
Okay.
Any
So,
questions?
any other questions?
Uh,
Tomas is typing.
Tom and Thomas, if you're talking about generation, it's only one code that's generated, and that's generated for HyperClassic. But because I'm doing a switch, I'm describing a new connection, and then I am performing a change connection. My description of the new connection here determines what database will be used, and that is already included in the runtime. Yes, Chris, the
Chris,
syncing is done
yeah.
as replication. I'm doing the syncing as replication, yes. Thomas, thank you for attending, and I hope this is of some benefit to you.
Oh, you saved us a whole day. You know that, right?
Oh, it took
With your
me about
with
a
your
day to figure all of this out, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and for volunteering again, as usual, and
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Okay. So I'm gonna
I
stop
will be
this recording.
uploading the source code just after Bob's presentation.
Yeah, just shoot it to me on Skype is fine, and then I'll put it
Okay.
on the site. Okay. Thank
Thank
you. I'm gonna
you.
stop the
Okay,
recording now.
bye-bye.
Bye.